Hey everyone, welcome to part 11 of my Windows Server 2025 training series. Today we're going to be discussing Active Directory Flexible Single Master Operation Roles, or as they are so eloquently called, FSMO roles. With FSMO roles, it's definitely important that you know them, but honestly, the only time that you're ever really going to be doing anything with them is you have to move them to another server for maintenance, or if you have a major domain controller failure that's holding some of these roles and you have to seize the roles. So let's get into exactly what are FSMO roles. So essentially they just break down Active Directory's functions into individual roles. There's 5 in total. First off, you have the Schema Master, so it handles any form of schema updates to Active Directory. So just think about if an application needs to add an attribute to a user, or if there's any kind of custom attributes that are added. You can think of Exchange Server as a good example of this, because when you install Exchange Server, your schema is going to be updated and it's going to add a lot of attributes to your users. So the domain naming master, it's responsible for just any kind of forest-wide domain changes, mainly if you add or remove domains from your forest. Then you have the PDC, the primary domain controller emulator. This is by far the most important role and the one that you need to make sure is absolutely on your data center DC or whatever your most redundant domain controller is. So it's mainly responsible for the DFS, the distributed file system, group policy updates, account lockouts, any kind of authentication and password changes, and a very important thing is time synchronization. So we're going to have a separate lesson that's entirely dedicated to time sync. If you've never set it up before, or if you've ran into an issue where your time is out of sync in your domain, I'm sure that you had a very interesting day getting everything fixed with that. But very excited for that lesson. With the RID, the Relative Identifier Master, it just ensures that each entity inside of AD has its own unique security identifier, also known as a SID. Finally, with Infrastructure Master, it just handles any kind of cross-domain objects if you do have a multi-domain forest. Now that we know what FSMO roles are, what are we going to cover in our lab today? So we're going to review how to list FSMO role holders, we're going to move FSMO roles to our secondary domain controller, and then we're going to move them back to our primary domain. This should be a pretty quick lesson. Again, you're not typically doing day-to-day activities with FSMO roles, so let's hop right into it and see what these look like. Over in our lab, let's go ahead and connect to our Windows 11 VM. And we're going to go ahead and also open up Active Directory. We're going to check our permissions. So we're going to go to our domain admin account. We're going to go to Properties, Member of, and we're actually going to add ourselves to this Enterprise Admins group and also this Schema Admins group. So these two are going to be required to move a couple of those FSMO roles over. So let's go ahead and make sure that you have those set. So we're going to apply, and we're also going to go ahead and check and see which domain controller we're currently connected to. So we're on GTDC2. So because these are technically in separate sites, now that we have that configured in AD sites and services, replication is going to take some time to finish. We're going to get around that because we want these permissions replicated to both domain controllers before we move the FSMO roles. It's very important to ensure that everything's replicated and there are 0 replication issues before you decide to move the FSMO roles over. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and connect to GTDC2. And we'll go ahead and do PowerShell. And we're going to enable PS remoting. This is just a handy command that enables PowerShell remoting for us without us manually having to set up anything. And perfect. As you remember from our previous lessons, we're going to try to manage the majority of everything from this RSAT box. Now what we're going to do is we're going to enter PS session, GTDC2. We're going to run this command, of course, replication. And this is case sensitive. So make sure you type it just as shown and hit enter. Oh, looks like we had a little bracket there. And hit enter. So we'll see replication looks good. We're also going to do a rep admin /rep summary. So we have 0 fails and 0 errors. That means we can proceed. But another thing we have to do, because we just added those permissions, or the groups rather, that grant us those additional permissions, we're going to sign out of this VM and we're going to sign right back in, just to make sure our session has those permissions applied. Now that we're signed back in, we're going to open up an administrative PowerShell. And we're going to run this command to check and see who our FSMO role holders are. So that command is going to be netdom query FSMO. So we see that GTDC1 holds all of our roles. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and move those roles over. So I did pre-populate this command a little earlier, so we don't have to type out the whole thing because it is a little crazy. So the full command is move-AD directory server operations master role. Identity is the server that you're going to be moving the roles to. And then operation master role is just going to be a numerical value for each individual FSMO role. You can also type out the name, but Microsoft was nice enough to add in these numerical values just to make the command much easier to type. So we're going to go ahead and hit enter. It's going to ask us if we want to move the roles, and we're just going to say yes for each one, just to easier troubleshoot if we happen to run into any weird errors as we're doing this. We're going to say yes, yes, yes again, and yes, and yes. Sweet, so we didn't have any errors, so we're going to run netdom query FSMO again. Now that we move the roles over to our secondary DC, let's go ahead and move those back. And this time we're going to say A for yes to all. We're going to check to make sure they moved. And perfect, they all moved back. So the last thing that we're going to do, we're going to go ahead and remove those permissions. Because typically you don't really need to have the enterprise admins or the schema admins unless you're moving FSMO roles or you're installing AD Connect. It's just best practices to make sure that you have least privileges at all times. Let's go ahead and remove those. We're going to click OK. And let's look at a couple of key takeaways from this video. The main key takeaways I wanted to cover from this video is I want you to remember that there are 5 total FSMO roles that can be moved to any domain controller. You typically don't see FSMO roles scattered around to other domain controllers unless you have a very, very large Active Directory environment. Think anywhere from tens to hundreds of domain controllers. It is recommended at a very bare minimum to keep your FSMO roles on your most resilient server. So if you have a domain controller that's on a physical server, in a data center, a colo, anywhere that has redundant power, any kind of redundancy, the best you can possibly get, put your FSMO roles on that, and you're probably going to be in pretty good shape. But the main purpose of moving FSMO roles is going to be if you're performing extended maintenance on your FSMO role DC, where it's going to be offline for a while, you will want to move FSMO roles to another DC that's going to be online. Typically, you will see this if you're replacing that domain controller or if you're doing a lot of maintenance to kind of rework your domain and redesign it. But that's going to cover it for this video. I'd like to thank you for watching. If you could please like and subscribe, that helps me keep this content free, and I can do much more of it for you guys. But thanks again, and I'll catch you in the next video.